Hi crafty people, Michelle here. Thanks for stopping by today. Today we're going to be doing a little bit of heat embossing using our Kaleidoscope powders. We're going to be using a whole bunch of other products from Maker Forte as well, including this stamp, which is one of their newest releases. It is in collaboration with Eileen Hall, and it is called Vintage Damask. The Kaleidoscope powder that we're going to be using is called Black Hole. We have a piece of ultra white cardstock. We're going to be using the Color Hive Clear Embossing ink pad, as well as some clear detail embossing powder. Now to start off, I just cut the piece of cardstock to a random size bigger than the finished card piece will be, because it will be cut down later. And also because we're going to be doing some heat embossing, I prepped it with the little bit of anti-static powder and set that to the side. I was originally going to use the coffee filter to mix our powders for the embossing, but I decided it wasn't too practical in the coffee filter, so I decided and I changed it to a little glass bowl. So to get our mix for the embossing, we're going to be doing 1 scoop of the Kaleidoscope powder to 6 scoops of the clear embossing powder. Now, it took me quite a few tries and trial and error to find the perfect or really good ratio of the 2 powders so that the clear embossing powder can do its thing. Because if you add too much of the Kaleidoscope powder or not enough of the embossing powder, it won't do its thing, and the Kaleidoscope kind of takes over and kind of doesn't let the embossing powder be embossing powder. So I found that a ratio of 1 to 6 worked perfectly. So I added all of that to the little glass jar, bowl, whatever you want to call that, and just kind of swirled around to get a nice mixed, even blend. And so when you do add the embossing powder, it will just kind of lighten it a little bit, which I was perfectly fine with because it turned the black hole into a nice softer gray, but it still keeps and maintains that beautiful metallic sheen that it does have. Now there was just a little bit of the embossing powder left in the container, so I just added it all to it because a little bit more embossing powder will not hurt. So for my stamping of the image, I grabbed my cardstock, added it to my Misty Stamp Positioner, and added my stamp. And I realized that I had forgotten to clean it off from a previous crafty session that I had, so I just added a little bit of water, sprayed it with some water, cleaned it off with paper towel, and it was good to go. So then I added it to my stamp positioner, and I just prepped the paper just one more quick time with a little bit more anti-static powder, because a little bit more won't hurt at all. So I positioned my stamp where I wanted it, but it didn't really matter in the end because it's all getting trimmed down. So I went over the stamp, I inked it up using the Color Hive Clear Embossing ink and pressed it all down. Now I use the Perfect Stamp Positioner Smoosher tool from Maker Forte, excuse me. And this stamp positioner smoosher is fantastic. It is not too big, it fits nice and comfortably in the hand, and it gives you a beautiful stamped impression every single time. So once that was done, I sprinkled on the embossing powder mix. I stamped it on just kind of at the top and just let the powder kind of trickle down. I went back and forth, kind of did that a few times. Because when you add it to the top and just let it fall down, any areas that did not catch enough powder at the beginning, it will catch it when you do this. So it should be a nice even application of the powders. So I just went back and forth, did that a few times, and then heated up my heat embossing tool. I made sure that it was heated up nice and good for about 20-25 seconds before I went to the paper with it to try and cut down on any potential warping of the paper or lessen it as much as possible. So once that was all nice and done with the heat embossing, you will have some stray Kaleidoscope powder still on your paper, but it will not stick to it at all where there was no ink. So you just go in with the cleanup powder brush or any brush that you have and just kind of brush it all off, and it is good to go, and it's absolutely perfect. And because we are setting the Kaleidoscope powder with the embossing powder, there is no need to spray this with a hairspray like you would normally do for Kaleidoscope powder, because the embossing powder keeps that on there and it's all set and all good to go. So now for my card, originally I was going to just call it a day with this beautiful background, add a sentiment, and that was it. Added a few little embellishments, but then I decided and realized that I needed more on it. I wanted more on it. So I grabbed the Winter Rose stamp set, which is a collaboration with Alex Siberia. And I grabbed a piece of the new Asteroid Vellum from Maker Forte, which is a beautiful light gray. Kind of has a linen finish to it and has a beautiful sheen as well. So I thought that would go perfectly with the monochrome look that I was going for today. So I added a piece of the vellum to the stamp positioner again, added all of my stamps to it, prepped the vellum with a little bit of the anti-static powder because I was going to heat emboss this in black just to cut back on any stray bits of black embossing powder. And then I heated that all up with, I inked it up first, with the Color Hive clear embossing ink, and sprinkled on my black detail embossing powder. Heated that all up again with the heating tool, and especially when you are heat embossing on vellum, you do really want to make sure that the embossing heat gun is heated up properly beforehand. I did this for a good 30 seconds before because vellum is definitely, it's more delicate than a cardstock would be, so you do get more warping on the vellum than you would on cardstock. So heating it up so it's nice and good and hot when you go in right away will cut back on it and minimize any warping that you do have. And you just want to make sure that you move your embossing gun around really good so you're not just concentrating the heat in one area for too long. So once I had those all heated up and the embossing powder melted, I fussy cut them all out, and through the magic of editing, we fast forwarded over that part because no one needs to see that. And just to kind of blend any edges in with the black embossing powder, in case I also didn't cut it right as close enough to the edge, I went along the edge of it all, of the flowers and the leaves, with a black Copic marker, or any black marker will do, just so it all blends seamlessly and you hide any edges you might not have got cut perfectly. So once they were all done, I put them to the side and I cut down my embossed background to 3 3/4 by 3.5 inches. So it would give a nice border around the finished card base. And then I also added a black matte card base to my embossed piece, and I cut that so it was 1/8 of an inch bigger all around on all the sides than my embossed piece, just to give it a nice black matte, not too big, but just a very nice fine detail of black around it. So I adhered my black matte to my embossed white cardstock using a little bit of liquid adhesive. And then I did just put on the card base to see how it would all go, and it took me a while to get a arrangement of the flowers and the leaves exactly how I wanted them and that I was happy with. Once I did, I grabbed a piece of press and seal, added it to the floral arrangement so the leaves and the flowers would stay exactly how I wanted them, while I added all the adhesive to the back of it. And even though this is a vellum, because it's a colored vellum, it does not show the adhesive, which is fantastic because normally with vellum it is so hard to add adhesive without it showing through. So I added some liquid adhesive and a foam dot to one of the flowers to stick them to my card front. But I realized in the end I did not want the one flower popped up with the foam adhesive, so I carefully peeled that away and added a little bit of liquid adhesive to it, and then added that right back on the card front. Now for my sentiment, I turned to the Simple Sayings. The one that I use is called Kindness All Around. And the sentiment that I chose to use is called Thank You for Being You. Now as well, because these are black, but they're printed on white cardstock, I would normally go around the edge of the sentiment strip with a black marker as well. the same that I used on all the flowers and leaves, but I completely forgot this time. But it wasn't a big deal. But it just kind of hides the white core of the cardstock that the black is printed on, just to blend it seamlessly again and make it seem as if it is printed on the black, but it's not that big a deal. I added all of that to my white A2 side folding card base. Popped up my sentiment using some foam dots, added that to the front. Now when I add my piece to my card base, I always add a little bit of temporary adhesive to the inside of it, just to keep the card closed so it doesn't pop up on you. When you add it on, it helps to get it nice and centered evenly on the front of the card. So now to finish it, once I had it all on there, once I had my sentiment on, I just added a few flat back black pearls. Try to say that 5 times fast. It's a bit of a tongue twister. But I added my embellishments on that, my black pearls, added my sentiment, popped it all up on the card base using the foam dots, and a little bit of liquid adhesive on the foam dots just to kind of give me a few extra seconds to have it position exactly where I want it. And that was it. I absolutely love how this card turned out. A nice, beautiful monochrome color palette. I really enjoyed playing around with the Kaleidoscope powder and the embossing powder, and it turned out beautifully. I really hope that you will try this technique out for yourself and see how you like it. I thank you so very much for stopping by. Let me down in the comments know what you think, and I hope you all have a wonderful day. Until next time, bye.